How many people know who the Standish Group is? No one, okay. So we've been around for about 30 years now. We started in actually 1985. We started out as actually doing work for venture capital firms. We were doing research for new technology and stuff like that, and that was about 1985. And we get involved in the venture business and continue to work with venture capital firms and doing venture angel work. Then we got involved with IBM and doing research on transaction processing. So we're doing big scale computing technology. Got involved with a company called Tandem, which was kind of high flyer at the time. And we moved through that, looked at message systems, working with IBM and digital on message systems. So, well, one of the things as we came across in the early 90s, that a lot of projects were failing. So we started to look at why IT projects and really software development projects were failing. And we've been doing that since that time. And as we went through the history of why projects were failing, and we created this fairly large database of projects with very detailed information. We wanted to understand what that was. And so we did that for, well, we've been doing that since 1994. And we created this very proprietary database and very proprietary methods. And one of the things we were, again, trying to figure out is how can we make software projects successful? So we would publish what is known as the Chaos Report. We published that since 1994. We would look at the data. We had work group sessions. We ran a thing called Chaos University in the springtime, in the fall of the year, where we brought in 60 CIOs. We would present our data and get some peer reviews on our data and information. We also do focus groups in the spring and present the data and get feedback on. And we're trying to really learn what was the reason IT projects fail and why were they failing. So we've been doing that for a long time, and last year we decided we're going to open up the database, we're going to open up the research, and we're working with the University of Antwerp. So we started working with them the spring of last year, and we presented to this group, and why I'm not going forward, I don't know, but let me see. Click. No. That's what I'm doing, but it's not working. No, I'm not in full screen. Well, there we go. Maybe that will work. Nope. Okay, well, let's try it this way. So, we were working with the University of Antwerp, and one of the professors at the University of Rotterdam said, gee, I like that, can I include that in my course? So we gave them access to the reports, and they had 60 students work on it from a report standpoint. And they also were working with a professor at the University of Delft, and they created a bunch of reports and stuff using the KS data. And in the fall of that year, we created a master's. We got 3 master students and 3 PhD candidates. And we wrote a syllabus on how to actually create the database, and we called it Creating Chaos. And so we have those students going through the program. We're working with a professor at the University of Antwerp on nano systems, and we're teaching a class on nanomorphics, which is small changes. And then we did a class, what we call a nano class, because it's a 2-day class on how to be a good sponsor. One of the things we found in our research over the years is the higher the grade of an executive sponsor or a project sponsor, the more likely it's going to return value and be successful. I don't know if anybody saw England's presentation. He did it on enterprise architecture. He wanted to see what the benefits of an enterprise architecture would have on projects, so we used the chaos database, made some changes to the database so we could look at that, and we ran some statistics, and he presented it, and he got his master's degree this spring. We're really proud of that. And this spring, the professor at Simons came back and says, well, what can we do this year with the students? And so we did 60 students doing a benchmark using the chaos database. So he broke it up into teams of 5 students, and they went out in the industry and they used the data to do a benchmark. And I'm going to show you one of the films. One of the things in the school, they had to create a film of what they learned from doing the benchmark. So we're moving forward with that program. We're getting more schools, getting more interest, and getting more professors in terms of doing more things with the chaos. And one of the things we're doing is creating these nanocourses, which I'll talk about. The resolution benchmark itself is it looks at project performance. Was it on time? Was it on budget? Did it come back with the target? Did it have value? Were the customers satisfied? So all those things, we started looking at that. We have, for years, we've been doing this certified benchmark where we go out into companies and we spend two weeks doing a certified benchmark, looking at various things, and then we'd certify that benchmark, and they could talk about the results. The resolution benchmark is much quicker and is easier for students to do. So it's sort of like a self-service benchmark, and it only uses certain data and doesn't use all the data. For instance, it has an organization profile and it has 14 attributes. It has a skills assessment and it uses 50 attributes. And then it has the projects themselves, and it's only about 14 attributes in that. So it's a low cost alternative to the certified benchmark, where students can do it basically, free, or the target can pay a little money. If you're looking for a certified benchmark, it's over $100,000. So I think this is pretty good. So in our database itself, so you understand the magnitude of this chaos database, it's got 1,000 organizations that are in the database, and we profile those, and we profile the skills of those organizations in terms of what we call the chaos factors of success. And there's 50 skills that come, and 10 basic factors, which are things like user involvement, executive sponsored report, skilled staff, emotional maturity is one of those. So we do that, and we figure there's about 150 man-years of insight into the chaos database, because it's done by executives mostly. So it has some interesting things. So there's basically 3 steps in the database. They do the organization, 14 questions, 50 skills questions, and 14 project questions for each project, and they have to do at least 25 projects. So I want to show you just a film of the output the students had to do as part of this. At least I think I'm going to show it to you. Maybe I won't. Can you turn this up, or it's as loud as it's going to go?
First we're going to discuss the findings, and then we will finish.
Okay, that's all right. Then, if you want to see it, it's on our website, www.standishgroup.com. It's an example of what the students did on that. So rather than bore you with it, I'll just go on and talk about the other stuff. And I probably don't have a lot of time.
This leads to the fact that the project managers
So what because the course, there's several things in creating a chaos database. You first have to do the organization profile, which is a bunch of work groups and takes several days to do. Then you have to create profiles of the project, and then you have to do some optimization things. So we broke that up so it's into these nanocourses. They're about half the time of a class, so it's about 14 hours. And then we hope other professors will take that and build around that core. So we do this postmodern profile, which is a project that has happened. There's about 81 questions and some work groups around that. We kind of teach students how to do that. As a professor, you can take that forward and use that information. We do the good sponsor. We're teaching people how to be a good sponsor. What we're really trying to train the trainer so a professor can take that information and create a course around the good sponsor class. So we have basically the existing class is a full thing, and it gets into all these things. So you have the resolution benchmark, which is the subset. Then we have an environmental assessment. So this is a work group where we go out and assess the environment in which the projects live, because the projects aren't by themselves, they live in an environment. How good is that environment? What's the emotional maturity of that environment? What are the skills level of the people? Then we have a project postmodern assessment, so we look at projects that happened. You know, what did they do? How did they do it? What did they look like? How big were they? How small were they? What were the people like? What are the things that caused that project to be successful or challenged or failed? And then if you want to do a new project, what are the chances of that project going to be successful? So we do a new project assessment and we look at the attributes of the project, then we measure that against the 50,000 database. So that's another class. And then we do a portfolio optimization class, which you teach people what kind of things they should think about when they're doing portfolio optimization of projects. And we've developed these mathematical schemes to do that, and so we teach that. And the Good Sponsor Roundtable is one of the key classes, I think, that's really important for people to learn. So I don't know if you've ever seen a chaos database, but results of chaos, but this is what we call the modern resolution. And we keep an active database of 10 years, but this was showing 5 years, last 5 years. And we can see the results of, and this is called the modern resolution, which means it's challenge means well, in this case, modern resolution, it means that it wasn't on time, it wasn't on budget, and the customer wasn't satisfied.
All three or
any one of the three. So if it was on time, on budget, but the customer hated it, then it's a challenge project. But if they're using it, if they're not using it, it actually is a failed project. So even if it's on time, on budget, but the customer's not using it, we consider that a failed project. If it's canceled before it's delivered, then that's a failed project. So that's the definition of those things. The successful is on time, on budget, and the customer's satisfied, at least somewhat satisfied. One of the things that in the IT industry has been a question mark of the formalization versus the more flexible or agile process. This has been going on for about 10 years now. And so we categorize in the database, we look at that and we categorize or code them as either a waterfall project, an agile project, or another project. And so when we look at this, we kind of say, okay, what does it mean in terms of the results? And so we see that if it's a small project, the difference, the delta between Agile and waterfall is much less versus a larger project where we see that the delta is much greater. And then in a medium-sized project. So it basically, if it's over like $10 million in labor, you know, we consider that a fairly large project. If it's under $1 million, that would be a small project. So this gives us a clue of what we think might be the root cause of project failure. Now, why is the root cause so important? Because everything sort of comes from that. But about 15 years ago, I was doing a talk about the factors of success, executive sponsors, user involvement, optimization, good tool management. And somebody asked me, well, what is the root cause? And so for 15 years, I've been racking my brain, looking at the research, thinking about what is the root cause of project failure. So as I show you these slides, I want to talk a little bit about that. Okay, so the next one is technical team skills. So we look at the technical team skills, and we can see some interesting results in success and failure. From gifted down to unskilled, we can see that the major difference in the results of the project. So you have a highly skilled team, you're going to have better results than if you have an unskilled team. Kind of makes sense, but this data kind of proves it. When I talk about the sponsor skills, the executive sponsor skills, and we have identified 50 attributes of a good sponsor. It's in my book called The Good Sponsor. You can get it on Lulu, Jim Johnson. And we see that there's a double the success rate from highly skilled to failed. So, and we can see the results that from 32% of successful projects have a highly skilled one versus 23% of projects have a poorly skilled. So the skill of the executive sponsor has some really important results. And
That was emotional skill.
I'm sorry, yeah. I screwed up.
I've done it before.
Right. So actually, well, let's go back. Let's clarify that. Yeah, that was emotional maturity. So what are the emotional maturity skills? Are things like setting expectations, okay? Telling people what you're going to do, communications, having some empathy from the user standpoint. Those are emotional maturity skills. And we've identified 50, and I don't have the book written for that one. But I do have it written for the sponsor skills, which we see that 35% of successful projects have a highly skilled versus only 8% of failed projects. Now, I have to tell you, I'm a little concerned about the actual lowness of this data, because that tells me that in some cases people aren't taking enough risk. And what we know, and from microservices, some of the other stuff, if you fail fast and fail good, you're going to get high value. Anyways, but we can see that the skills of the executive sponsor have a direct relationship to the outcomes of a project, for at least on time, on budget, and with a satisfied customer. There's actually 6. I'm interested in on time, on budget, on target, on goal, which is the strategic goal, and is the customer satisfied? And I have a 5-point scale on that. And does it return value? So there's actually 6 attributes we look at. I'm just showing you 3 of the things we're showing here. Now, for 20 years, we've been developing these massive tools to manage projects. We have PMI, we have all this information. We're teaching people about projects. So you would think that having a highly skilled project manager would affect the outcomes of projects. Would you think that? How many people would think that? No one?
Or if the PMI, I would expect it.
Yeah. Well, for IT projects, it doesn't make any difference.
We have here two answers to that question, please.
Okay,
Among the failed ones,
yeah.
the moderately skilled have more failures than the poorly skilled.
Yeah.
What would be your answer or your interpretation?
Well, the interpretation is that there's some activity, some things they do well, but they're not doing the most important things in moderately skilled. Because remember, there's 50 things we measure.
Yeah, but why they are more they are failing more than the poorly skilled?
It's the data.
Isn't it strange that, let's say you have 100 cases and you put moderately skilled and fully skilled, that 40% fail with the moderately skilled and only 28% with the fully skilled? Maybe a definition of moderately skilled.
Well, it's a calculated ranking. So we look at the 50 skills that you need and we rank them, and this just turns out that the 50 skills were rated higher.
In my experience, the moderately skilled, they think they know what they don't know.
Right. It's good.
That's in my experience, but it's not another.
The second thing is one of the things we found in looking at the data, if we have a poor executive sponsor and so a team, they will overcome that. If you have a moderately skilled executive sponsor, sometimes they meddle too much.
Yeah, that's my experience, yeah.
But it may also be true that the poorly skilled sponsor is not asking for something quite as ambitious. We don't know if that's.
Well, it happens, but it's not as rare as you think it is.
Okay.
So what we know from this, from looking at the project manager, it has little effect on the outcome. So the higher the skill of the project manager doesn't seem to affect the outcome. And we see that with tool usage and the structured environments, that they're much lower in the value range. So they actually have a poorer range. So if we look at those, what we call those other things, the winning hand we call, 81% of successful projects are not 81% of. If you have those 5 attributes, the highly skilled executive sponsor, the emotional maturity, you'll have an 81% chance you're successful. If you don't have those, okay, if you have none of those and they're all in then you only have a 1% chance you're going to be successful. So now we say, okay, so we know that the things that we've been doing for the last 20 years are wrong from the PMI's point of view. We see that Agile is a little better. What does it mean? So now we want to know, what are the root cause of project poor performance? What causes projects to be less than successful? And from this data, I can make an inference. It's not purely scientific, it's more inference-based. So if we look at what Malcolm Gladwell says, that decisions are made intuitively, okay? And if we look what Dan Kahneman says, he says that evidence-based decisions are better. And if we do some crowdsourcing, we can maybe come up with some fairly good decisions quickly. But when you're in the heat of battle, and what is battle to us? Battle to us is, okay, before you do the project, you can think about it. It's fine. You can do all the things, you can do the business plans, you can do all that. That's not going to affect, because we don't look at it at that point. But when you're in an active project, you need to make fast decisions. You need to make things, because things slow down, and years ago I said that time is the enemy of all projects. and actually money is the root of all evil. So if we look at this, we say, okay, if you're in an active project, you want to make quick decisions. And if you're in a post project and the things fail, breaking down, you want to make even faster decisions. So I've come up with this theory, and it's a pure theory from looking at all these 100,000 projects over the years and doing focus groups and work groups and stuff like that. That the root cause of project failure is decision latency. Now, what is decision latency? So I'm saying the value of the interval is higher than the quality of the decision. The interval is a time when you come across something, you have to make a decision, and when you make a decision. That's the interval. And time and time again, I see that the interval is the crux of the problem. If you have small interval, you have a better chance of success. If you have a big interview, you have a better chance of failing. So when we think about all the things we're doing, it's not that PMI is wrong, okay? It's not that Agile is right. The fact is the interval is reduced with Agile because we have self-directed teams. And that's why the smaller waterfall projects are successful, is because people can make decisions because they have less team members and they have less decisions to make.
Also, isn't the idea of Agile, because you break it up into these periods, that you keep on changing your decision? You could say, I made a mistake, let's turn 45 degrees to the right. If you're in a waterfall or in the old requirements way, if you're going this way, you say, well, I made a mistake, we'll get to that at the end, and by then the project is through.
Right.
I think let's try to keep comments down. To make some as valuable as they make them as bad as I am.
In our experience, and according to the incremental planning, the more uncertainty you have, the shorter should be the increment of the decision.
Right.
Yep.
Maybe.
No.
I know it's correct, but let's.
So what does this actually mean when we think about it? And well, I was looking at the data, on the Obamacare website, right? The Obamacare website. It's a terrible, it was a tragic in the site, but it wasn't. It was about a $30 to $50 million project that they spent over $1 billion. Where did the money go? So where did all that money go? And you look at it, you kind of dig down a little bit. There's a project just failed out of Scotland. The Scottish Police Department was supposed to be $50 million, 50 million pounds. It ended up 140 million pounds. It failed. And you look at it and say, what about that? What happened there? Why did it go from 50 million to 140 million? And people will say, okay, it's the change. The changes, they added requirements, they did this, they did that, they made a change. So, okay, so you're making all these changes. What is the cost of change? And I don't know this for a fact, but I think it's true. Is the cost to actually manage the change cost more than the change? So you take a project like Obamacare, it should have been a $50 million project, and you have to make a change. You bring 20 people in a room to debate the change. They go back. A week later, they come back and they said, well, they want to reverse that decision, and then now you end up with a $50 million project that costs $1 billion. 5 minutes, okay. I'm almost done. But I'm on budget. So if we take a typical project, say a $10 million project, within that project, we're going to make 10,000 decisions. Now, how did we come up with that number? We did some focus groups. We talked to people and we said, oh, well, how many decisions you make? What kind of decisions you make? So we know that if the average latency is 1 hour to make a decision, then that's sort of normal. Okay, so that's sort of in the price of it. If you take 5 hours for the average decision, that 10 million project's going to go up to 17.5. And if you take 10 hours to make a decision, then it's 25 million. Now you might think this is kind of weird and not really realistic, but we were just at the Social Security of the Netherlands doing a review of a project because they have to go through this process called BID, which is the Bureau of IT, and they have to get it approved, anything over 5 million euros. We saw one decision they make took 6 weeks. Not only did it take 6 weeks, there was about 10 meetings on that one decision, which meant that two of the groups, and they were doing Agile, by the way, pretend to do Agile, that they had 2 groups of 10 people were sitting around waiting for that decision for 6 weeks. Now we were able to do some interesting things. We actually, the project was estimated to be about $60 million. When we reviewed the project, we got back, we could cut it down to about $5 million, and they didn't have to go through the bid process. They got 90% of the things they needed. So that turned out to be pretty successful. Anyways, so decision latency, why is it important? It's the time between the decisions and things. Good decision latency is about 1 hour on average. If poor decision latency is over, it's 2 hours. So one of the things you might want to think about is you go back, how do you benchmark this? And that's what we're looking at now, how to do that. We think, this again is thinking, if you empower if you empower the teams, if the executive sponsor powers the teams, they'll have better outcomes because they can make decisions quicker. You need to have emotional maturity teams to be able to do that because they need to do that. We know that small projects work, whether it's a microservice or a minimum viable product, it's okay. Package software reduces decisions, we know that. We need to drastically reduce oversight and governance. This is counterintuitive, whatever people are talking about, because they say, "Oh, we need more governance. It's failed." That's like pouring gasoline on a raging fire. What you need is less governance. What you really need is output. You need delivery, because delivery trumps governance. And if you're going to use one of these enterprise management tools and do this, really look at what you're actually needing, because so much of what we count too much, we count the wrong things, we put too much weight on things. So you really need to count what counts. Maybe pick 3 things you want to count, but don't count everything because it's a waste of time, money, and it increases the decision process. Eaglin's study looks like enterprise architecture may help in the decision process because it spells out the architecture ahead of time, and so people don't have to make architectural or technology decisions within the project. So that may help. We're not sure. We're just embarking on that.